Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's Say Report. I am your host, Sejohn, along with my host companion, Devon Decker.
I'm Devon Decker.
And
I realize that what just happened. I'm sorry to cut you off. You take it up. I feel like I'm just a soundboard. I had to say more than just that because it felt like Sejohn alone, and he had just isolated phrases that I would say and
the
just
secret's
hit the
out.
buttons.
This whole show is just me just pressing a fucking soundboard for Devon quotes.
There is no Devon
No,
Decker.
I was gonna say that this is gonna be the only podcast this week that doesn't start with some made up rap to try and introduce you to the fact we're gonna talk about Hamilton for a couple minutes.
Yes, welcome to the show where it happened.
Well, never mind. I lied.
That's not a rap. That's not a rap. I could have
No.
been like, welcome to the Say Report. I'm old, content, and full. And that's why I didn't really like that show. But there's more to talk about than that. I'm sorry. I stepped all over it. Do you want to take it back from the beginning? I feel like I've ruined things for you.
No, we had a big week last week of talking about some like real heavy and important stuff, and then this weekend, a show that by all accounts could be taken as a heavy show, I think actually bears itself to be just kind of just a good fucking time. Like a show that you don't, in the end, doesn't ask you to take it seriously if you don't want it to. It came out for us, and the world sat and watched. It's like it was the first time that everybody kind of in this country just took a second. And people did their thing where afterwards they then talked about it and ripped it apart and debated the A, B, and C. And some people have come out and talked about how proud they are of the fact that they didn't watch it, which is, I guess, a thing that we do now in our culture when we just wear in our sleeves how happy we are that we didn't participate in the zeitgeist, which is fine. Like that's always been a choice, I thought.
Yeah, you don't get a medal for that.
Yeah.
We're going to be discussing, if you haven't picked it up from all of this, Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, which just dropped on Disney Plus. And if you weren't aware of that, you probably don't have Disney Plus, or you have Disney Plus and you're not using it because
which is a shame for a lot of reasons, but also like Disney Plus numbers went up this weekend because of it. Like if you didn't, so even if you didn't have Disney Plus, there's a good chance that you went and you got it, even if just for the week or whatever they do for like their trial period. People went out and they got it.
Well, yeah, because it's $300 for a ticket, or it's $8 to stream it.
Yeah, well, and so Hamilton did some things this weekend in its usual. I hesitate to say groundbreaking because there's a lot of stuff that it gets credit for that it is. It's not the first show that did a lot of these things. It's just the first show that a lot of people paid attention to, which in and of itself is an important thing to recognize. The fact that it is so good that it did bring some things to people's attention. But anyway, it's a hugely successful Broadway show, now a hugely successful streaming experience that I think is going to change the landscape for some streaming choices in the future. Maybe not like in noticeable ways, at least at first. But for instance, I read not one but two articles this week titled "There Should Be More Broadcast Musicals." Apparently ignoring the last 5 years of like Sound of Music and The Wiz and
and the last 5 years, right? Didn't they do an adaptation of that as well?
They did a movie version. They didn't do a TV version, but the idea of it being broadcast into the home, people were like, "Man, this was a really great experience. There should be more filmed Broadway shows that should be put on the air." And I just wanted to slap everybody involved in those conversations.
And Mr. NBC just like took off his toupee and ripped it up in anger.
Yeah, I know. Like even Fox with its not so stellar performances of Rocky Horror and what was the Jesus one that they did?
Jesus Christ Superstar, the Jesus one.
Didn't they do The Passion with Tyler Perry, or was that somebody else? That might not have been Fox.
Was that something that happened?
Yes, that was a thing that happened. Yes, Tyler Perry directed a live for TV like musical Easter celebration. Yeah, like that's what I mean. Is like clearly people were not paying attention to these things until Hamilton came along and did it. Right? Like I think that's a big thing. It's not just the Disney effect this time around. Like Hamilton itself has this kind of effect on audiences. So again, is a thing that's getting like it's a perfect example of what this show does. It gets this praise, it receives all of this praise, and I think it should. Like, I want to be clear that where I stand on this issue, it is a show that I think should receive a lot of conversation and praise, but we need to be very careful about where we place that praise sometimes, because things get kind of left in the background, like the history of musicals on TV and about how Hamilton was not the first to do it. But anyway, yeah, so Hamilton came out and the whole country kind of just like decided to pay attention to that this week, because I'll tell you this, pay attention to some of the other political bullshit going on for 4th of July was not exactly an option for a lot of people. But yeah, man, like, I've been doing a lot of talking about Hamilton.
Yeah, like, you have been doing it. And the reason why he's been doing so much talking about Hamilton is because I am firmly on the other side of the ocean regarding my feelings on Hamilton. And I feel, first of all, I'd like to address your whole, these people who went out and were like, I didn't watch it. I was never going to be that person. I'm not that person ever. I think the one time I wore it as a badge of honor was Zoolander, because there was a time in my life from 1999 when Zoolander came out through to 2009 when I stopped working at Hollywood Video, that if anyone ever recommended that I watch Zoolander, it's not that I had anything against Zoolander. It's just every time I got a recommendation, I like added a year till I would watch Zoolander.
What did Hollywood Video have against Zoolander? Did I ever tell you about the time I tried to rent it and the guy at the video store wouldn't let me? Not for any reason other than he said it wasn't a good movie and would not let me rent it.
So that's the Hollywood Video, I imagine, in the Shaw's Plaza across from East Providence.
Exactly.
That's not a Hollywood Video problem. That is the staff of that Hollywood Video's problem. They were all assholes. I covered one shift there, and in that one shift that I was there, everybody's like, wow, you know what you're talking about, and you're kind, and I actually feel welcomed into this environment. And I'm like, what the hell goes on here every other day? And they're like, oh, it's bad.
that
is
bad.
Kind
of shit. Yeah, that kind of shit. Like, and like, imagine me like a 14-year-old kid going in with like whatever. It was like a fucking Friday in the middle of the summer, so I was just renting, 6 things like to watch all week. And like, I distinctly remember grabbing Zoolander off the shelf and this guy being like, oh, you can't rent that. And there was a long moment where I thought he meant like, it's R-rated, you're not old enough, and I wanted to be like, it's PG-13. Like no. Turns out the only reason he wasn't letting me rent it was just because he didn't think it was a good movie.
I don't think people should rent. First of all, fuck that guy. I don't know who this guy is, but fuck that guy. And the reason why fuck that guy, and I gotta tell you, there is something everybody satisfying about saying fuck that guy. And I bet you have some guy in your life that you want to say fuck that guy about. Do it. You don't need to do it to him, but like, it's cathartic. I feel real good. But fuck that guy, because you don't get to be the high and mighty working at the video store guy who like is gonna gatekeep and say what can and cannot be rented by people when you're working at a corporate fucking sellout like Hollywood Video.
Yeah.
You're working at I don't even know the name. You work at RST Video, right? Just to grab from the Smithverse, and it's real because we've been there. Then you have a fucking foot to stand on. It's not a big one, but like, it's a foot that you have to stand on, because you are in like a small place and you get to be like the keeper of cinema. The guy at the freaking on-campus movie store where I got my anthology of Howard the Duck and my copies of Coupling, and he was so mad that I bought Coupling, though not because it's not worth watching. He's like, I was kind of hoping that nobody would buy it because I was going to keep that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no, that's not how this works. It was a good deal. But like, yeah, fuck that guy. You work at Hollywood Video. You don't get to say what people should or should not rent, or tell someone you can't rent this movie, because my opinion is that it's garbage. Because look in the mirror, Kyle. You work at Hollywood Video. You don't get an opinion.
Yeah.
Sorry. But Zoolander is like the one time where I'm like, I'm not going to watch it until a period of time has passed where no one has told me to watch it. I want it to be my decision. I want to come to the Ben Stiller of it all on my own. And I did. Eventually I did. And it's all right. I think Zoolander 2 is better. And that's a real statement I just made.
And that says something about you as an audience member.
Yeah.
But yeah, so talk to me about Hamilton, man.
So just to put the pin on that is that I was not going to watch Hamilton. And the reason why I was not going to watch Hamilton is I was never interested in Hamilton, even as it had this meteoric rise and became the biggest thing in Broadway history. And I had all these friends who were like, "Oh, I'm in the lottery. Oh, you're in town. Would you put your name in the lottery, even if you don't go? Like, because there's a chance that you could win it." Like, people were crazy about Hamilton.
Still are.
And they still are, even though you can watch it on your TV for $8. So it was one of those things that never really touched me. And part of that reason is Lin-Manuel Miranda, for me, was In the Heights. I think that In the Heights is great. I was very excited to see the film adaptation that was supposed to come out, well, now 3 weeks ago, before everything shut down and exploded.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that, like, I thought that was a very well-written show. Johnny Ramos plays Ustavi in that, and he portrays Larry and Philip in Hamilton. So it was nice to see that, like, Lin-Manuel Miranda did give some props to the guy who was, like, what got him on the map and what allowed him to be the person who could present something like Hamilton and actually get it made. Because he is called In the Heights his grad school show. And I get that. So it was one of these things where, like, everybody's talking about Lin-Manuel Miranda like he's new. And I'm like, well, he's not new. This is very strange. So, like, I already had, like, a weird thought about it. Just being honest on that. And then I really have to ask a question here.
Okay.
Regarding the show Hamilton. And I need an answer from you. And people at home, send me your answers at Devon D. Decker on Twitter or to the Say Report on Twitter. The target audience for Hamilton, is it people who know absolutely nothing about Alexander Hamilton?
I think it's the kind of show where it caters to both audiences. Like, okay, honest answer.
I don't think it does. As someone who stands in the other one.
I think it caters to both audiences because, as somebody that doesn't know much about Alexander Hamilton, I learned a lot about him. But as somebody that knows a ton about the Revolutionary War, there were so many good little moments left and right about, like, comments that were slipped in and things that were said and characters that showed up that like that just fucking rock. And some of it is very meta. So, like, one of the biggest kind of in jokes that I kind of love that they don't really, like, push is the double casting stuff that occurs. So the biggest example that I found most amusing is Lafayette doubled with Jefferson the entire time, like, in that show, and the one that ends up playing his son that plays his friend. You said the names earlier, Philip
Johnny
and
Ramos, Philip and Larry Lawrence. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that kind of stuff. I think, as somebody that knows a little something about what was going on with the Revolutionary War, where Jefferson stood on a lot of stuff, to the fact that some people claimed that maybe he hid in France the entire time, and the fact that Lafayette, he's played by the dude that plays Lafayette in the beginning, is like amazing. So, like, there's a ton of that sort of stuff going on, and then lyrically, there are things that are pointed out and said that are like bombs that are dropped that are pretty funny. Like, I love that moment when they talk about how George Washington's Martha Washington named a feral cat after him because of his fucking habits of sleeping with people. Like that kind of shit is just hilarious, right? I think that there was a little bit of something in there for the history file in me, but also as somebody that is like, Hamilton's one of the few people that I don't know much about, which I think is kind of was the case before the show for a lot of people, that I think that's why he chooses Hamilton, is because there's a lot of really interesting stuff that we don't talk about with him in the places that where he was, the rooms he was in, right? Like I think that kind of shit was not well known before this, and then more to that point, there's a lot of stuff that people are talking about, a lot that deeper history files than me, where they're talking about, oh, but the show doesn't go into this and doesn't go into that. And it's like, well, first of all, it's fucking 3.5 hours long. Like, if you wanted to go even deeper into Hamilton, like, get Ken Burns to make a documentary. Like I get it. Like, yes, it didn't cover all of its bases, but that's interesting to me. Is it even still left more doors open for me to now actually look into and go deeper into? Because, like, the whole last 10 minutes of the show where Hamilton is dead, spoiler alert, and learning all of that stuff about his wife, like, I didn't know any of that stuff about her opening the first like not publicly run orphanage,
No,
but
just
instead
the first
privately.
orphanage. It's the first
Like
orphanage ever.
right, and
Yeah.
like the idea that like that kids had a place to fucking go again, right? Which is like which after the Revolutionary War, it was the first time in this country where we had a lot of war orphans, and it was not the last time. So like it's a huge thing, right? Like yeah, so it's weird. So I firmly believe that there was definitely stuff in there for both audiences. Now you want to argue how much? I mean, then you start arguing semantics of like how into
Yeah.
history people are not, right? Like, so it's going to be different for everybody.
Okay. It's a question that I felt I had to ask because it's not like Titanic where everybody knows that the boat is going to sink.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the three people that I watched Hamilton with, which is my mother, father, and sister, none of them knew that Aaron Burr died in a not Aaron Burr, that Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. None
Mm-hmm.
of them knew that. So for me, who like is well aware of that fact and many more things, because I'm the idiot who for fun took a 400 level history course my senior year of college, and that was one of the big focal points was Alexander Hamilton. So, because that book had just come out, the one that this is based on had just come out, so it was part of the curriculum that the professor had decided to focus on in this, American post the Revolution class.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great course. I absolutely loved being part of that course, and it really steered who I am as a human being. But being someone who knows how that story ends,
Mm-hmm.
when they first do the 10 dual commandments, I'm like, oh, this is cute because there's going to be a reprieve later on when he dies. Like, it just felt like having knowledge of the true historical outline prevented me from getting as
Okay.
involved in the show
You do
as.
remember that they tell you in the first 5 minutes of the show that Aaron Burr is the one that kills him, though,
Yeah,
right?
but they don't tell you that it's a duel. That's my thing here. I'm
No,
the man who
I
killed him.
guess.
Like, just knowing
Right.
that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
is fine. I mean, that speaks to the other thing. I mean, one of the things about Hamilton that I didn't know before I watched it was just how derivative it is of existing theater.
Oh
And
yeah.
that always sticks out to me in a weird way when a show that everybody treats like this is the best thing I've ever seen, and then if I ever eventually get to it and I see, well, it's interesting that you say that because a lot of shows have had this similar structure and plot and stuff, and it's strange that those did not excel to the same level as this. I mean, people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing that you have to remember though is like what this show is doing that is groundbreaking is not its structure, right? Like it is a Broadway show. That is key because the rule that it's then breaking is the element of music that it is then using to tell this story. It's the juxtaposition of hip hop versus this historical like setting and story, and the use of like a just multitude of different people of color in the story to tell this story. So it's using the groundwork of Broadway in order to push boundaries in other places. That's not where people give it credit for pushing boundaries. Nobody out there is saying Hamilton invented the fucking 5-act structure.
Yeah.
That's not what anybody talks about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. It's just
like that's not what people are giving the show credit for.
right. So, but I think it's because of that, like being unable to get as deep into this as I could have if it was someone that I didn't know as much as I know about. Those things stood out to me a little bit more. Not the 5-act structure, like I understand that, but just like, it's okay, so we're hearing it from the man who kills the man. It's called Hamilton, but really this is Judas's story. This is Aaron Burr's story, a la Jesus Christ Superstar. And then there are a bunch of other stuff, like King George is King Herod in like almost every single way. And it was just one of those things, like, things in my life that did not help me enjoy Hamilton are as follows, and I quote, the fact that I have a degree in theater, the fact that I took a course studying Alexander Hamilton, and the fact that I didn't get to see it when it was new. And that was the strangest thing that I took away from watching Hamilton on Disney Plus. Is I wonder if I had come to it on my own, if I would have enjoyed it. If 5 years of praise being heaped upon it acted as a hurdle that was just too high for me to clear to enjoy this.
See, so and that's really interesting because all three of those things I feel like are like the key reasons I did enjoy it. Like as somebody that has like a love of that time of history, but not like a encyclopedic knowledge of it, like I feel like I got a lot out of it. As a theater person, like I lit up when there was moments that were like harkening back to theatrical shows, like and the like the introduction of Burr as the narrator and introducing him as the one that is going to be the back and forth. I mean, all I could think of the entire time was fucking Salieri. You know what I mean? Like, and I liked that. Like when that stuff happened, it felt like that was a thing for me. Like it was him welcoming me into this show in a way that other shows will actively act like they're hiding those elements, or they will push against that notion of or those norms, and to the point where it's alienating. Like that's one of the beauties of Hamilton for me, is that it's not alienating. It allows an audience that does not experience Broadway, does not feel like Broadway is a part of their life, about their cultural existence, and it opens the doors for them to come and enjoy a Broadway show and enjoy elements of Broadway that they would otherwise never be introduced to. And so, like, that's what felt good about Hamilton to me.
I see, and that I agree with that, but I also feel like this is not the show that gets people into Broadway, and this is just on accounts of it.
But it has. We know after 5 years.
But we say that, but like, are these people going to see other shows? Because I know people who've seen Hamilton like 6 times, but they don't see other theater. Like, I don't get it. It's this weird disconnect that I have seen and experienced in my own life that, like, I mean, the fact of the matter is the way that
I can answer that anecdotally as a person that was teaching both when Hamilton came out and the 5 years after. Like, I straight up had kids that were in classes where, like, they didn't know theater, but they knew Hamilton. And like, yeah, I'm here as an account major, but now I'm taking this theater class because I heard about this Hamilton shit, and that was pretty good. And that happened in colleges. Like we had students just like before that, people were like, I didn't know what theater was, but Avenue Q was pretty fun. Like there's always that show, and Hamilton is one of those shows. And it was that in more of a mass market than any show before it, you know?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. And it felt like comfort food to me. Like, it felt like this is something that's easily digested. It's something that you'll enjoy. I mean, it's very repetitive to me, which I feel like breeds that sort of praise and enjoyment in people.
We got to talk about this though, because you said that you had the same exact issue with Lin-Manuel Miranda and Moana, and the repetitive nature of lyrics and motifs and things like that in there. And I don't know how to explain or express to you, like, that is a huge part of hip hop. Like entire albums having full motifs that carry throughout, people's careers that have full motifs that carry out, where they harken back to songs and they sample their own shit from 5 albums earlier. Like that is all part of that, on top of the fact that, like, in theater, we really like the idea of a motif coming forward. We literally have a word for it in motif, where like lines get repeated and there's echoes throughout the show. Like, so you have 2 things working against you in that case. If you're not happy about the repetitive nature, well, both hip hop and Broadway embrace that.
It's not that I'm not happy about it. It's just, again, I honestly feel like I missed the window for this to be accessible to me, and it's something that, after I watched this show, which is only 2.5 hours long, it's not 3.5 hours long. Let's not scare people away if they haven't seen it yet. It's 2:40 on Disney Plus with a 1-minute intermission, which is not a long enough intermission. I gotta tell you, I was expecting like the Godfather type intermission where they give you the 10 minutes to go get a soda and use the bathroom.
You know how to use a pause button.
Yes,
right?
I paused it, Sejohn. I understand how it works, but I was a little surprised that, like, it wasn't a countdown for the intermission, and then maybe a thing like, generally the intermission during this show is X minutes long. Like, I don't know. It's just a weird thing. I know I'm making crazy complaints about this thing, but it made me turn inward and try to figure it out. And I talk a lot about like wanting to avoid spoilers, but I think it's less that. I think it's more the fact I want to consume things when they're new so that I'm able to formulate my own opinion outside of the zeitgeist. And
That's
Hamilton really like brought that as a focal point of my personality to the forefront for me to like delve deeper into.
I that's like I totally get that, and we've talked about that before, not just with you, with me sometimes, and with a lot of people. That is generally the case. When a bunch of people are telling you this thing is super good, you kind of want to push that thing away from yourself as long as possible, because it just feels like you don't know how that opinion is going to affect it. And sometimes you find out it doesn't, and sometimes you find out that it does, and that's disappointing when it does, right? And I get that. I honestly couldn't even watch it when it was new because so many people were talking about it. It wasn't that I didn't want to see it. I knew straight up I cannot watch it right now. I need to wait until this thing, and this was the perfect timing for me because it's been a couple of years since I've been around theater people, to be entitled to be blunt about it. It's been kind of nice to be away from the talk about this show for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then to be able to then come into it and see it now, it felt like seeing it with fresh eyes in a way that if I had seen this 5 years ago when everybody was talking about it, I might have been closer to feeling like you're kind of feeling about it, like overly excited. You know what I mean? Like the audience is overly excited and pushing me into a feeling that I don't know if I'm going to have, and like nobody wants to be put in that box. It's like when a friend tries to show you a fucking YouTube video and they swear it's funny, and it's just not in that environment, right?
No, it's not.
Like,
right. It's like it almost triggers a like, well, I can't find this funny because Chris finds it funny. And if Chris finds it funny, it's not funny. I know what Chris thinks is funny. Right. I know more about comedy than Chris.
And I can totally like get that. And like and I don't want to like make you feel like I'm like attacking you for not liking this thing, because I don't want people out there that don't like this thing, because there are people out there, surprise surprise, that don't enjoy this thing, and that's totally fine. Like that is a fine thing to feel, and something that we should embrace right now is that everybody should be entitled to a fair and honest opinion. And like it's just anybody here that's going to listen to you talk about how the reasons you don't like it are because of A, B, and C, I want to make sure that like we acknowledge that like those are going to be like key building blocks. So if those aren't the reasons you like it, and that's totally fair, you're not like, nobody out there is going to like it if they feel that kind of way about things, you know?
Yeah, and I want to stress that I tried to go into it with as open a mind as possible. And it was like after the opening song where I was like, oh no, this is the type of theater that I just generally do not like. Like the type of stuff where when I was getting my degree, this was the stuff I would try to avoid. And I'm like, okay, but we're still going to try to approach this with like an idea to try and enjoy it. And it just kept throwing up obstacles for me throughout. And that it was disappointing. Like when
it is actively trying to be part of old theater canon, and I think it succeeds, and I think your dislike actually only more proves that to me. The fact that you are not into like the old Broadway canon, like that's just not your bag. The fact that Hamilton makes you feel this way, I think it actually ends up succeeding in what it's attempting to do, and it's on you, and it's on anybody out there to decide whether or not that is something you enjoy or not. So it's not to like not to take fun at your discomfort.
No, I knew what this conversation was going to be.
No, it actually makes me kind of think it's doing exactly what I thought it was doing the whole time. Is good to hear.
It's like, I mean, I can definitely focus on one moment where, and it's how I approach things. Like I love when there's like an esoteric reference to something in a thing that I'm watching. I understand, and I get it, but other people don't. Like, that is something that appeals to me. So then when I'm watching this, and George Washington says he is the very model of a major modern general, and I'm like, why the fuck is he throwing Gilbert and Sullivan into this? Like,
I laughed so hard.
What?
I laughed so hard.
Yeah, and I groaned so hard with, like, And it's that thing. I think, like, going through it all, it also kind of speaks to Deadpool 2. Let's just compare Hamilton and Deadpool 2 today, with the fact that I felt like Deadpool 2 was trying too hard to be inclusive and, like, try to give people those moments that I enjoy. And when it tries too hard, it feels like pandering to me. And then I'm like, well, I would have preferred you just did it. Like, you didn't, like, nod at the camera, like, you get it? Did you get what we just did there, having George Washington say that? I don't know. I don't know. And the step further of this is I sat and I watched this show with my family thinking that I was alone in my feelings. Thinking that after this is going to be awkward because I'm going to have the discussion and they're like, well, I like this and I like that. And I just had to smile and go along. But it didn't appeal to anybody in this house. And that was the biggest surprise of all.
No, I don't. I mean, like, I know that there are people out there that are talking about not enjoying it. I have yet to meet a person in life besides you now that has talked about not at least having fun. You know, I know some people out there that are a little turned off by the people that are fucking obsessed with it, and there was a brand of that for a long time. But that being said, I don't know anybody else besides you that has, like, not at least smiled while watching it.
I smiled. I will be honest with you. There was one moment where I smiled, and that's when Aaron Burr is standing on a table with a tablecloth, and he hops, and they pull off the tablecloth, and he lands. I'm like, yeah. That was pretty cool. That was a cool moment.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel weird about it, because it's not like there are a bunch of things that the people who don't like this show cite. Like you said, like, there's a whole hashtag cancel Hamilton thing going on Twitter right now because the show portrays him as being sympathetic to slavery and wanting it to end, especially with his friendship with, is it Lawrence, who's down in the South? Yeah, he's the one who gets killed. Who's right in the South trying to free the slaves, emancipate 3,000 individuals to fight against the British. And then, you know, in fact, Alexander Hamilton brokered a lot of slave trades for the family that he married into. So, like, there are people who are like, I don't like it on this, is that it, like, glazes over a more disgusting part of a guy who, like, maybe it's this too. I don't find Alexander Hamilton particularly sympathetic. And I have read articles where Lin-Manuel has said that's he was trying to make him sympathetic.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, as an author, like, and your protagonist, you always try and find ways to help your audience connect with them. But also, at the end of the day, I mean, you don't have to make me cry when Hamilton dies. That's not the part that makes me cry in this show. You know what I mean? Like it's the realization that honestly, it's a lot of what happens with Burr that really gets me super emotional, because there's a lot of moments where Burr just gets kind of fucked by Hamilton, and, like, it's the same way you feel about Salieri in Amadeus. Like there's a lot of moments where, whether by his own stupidity or by the world just being cruel, Salieri gets just put in shit situation after shit situation. And the same thing happens to Burr in this show, right? I mean, one of the big things for me that I've got gripes with personally is the fact that they barely hint at the fact that the girl, really, that's what my complaint is that he ends up cheating on his wife with, when she says to him, why don't you come away with me and the family and the kids and spend some time, and he's like, no, I've got to work on this, I've got to, you know, still have to win the war type shit. And then, like, 2 days after she leaves, he ends up sleeping with another person. That other person was, like, an underage girl. like that's not addressed at all. But, like, Hamilton actually, like, actively in a power position, like, takes advantage of an underage woman. And, like, that is gross, right? Like, Hamilton is no saint. Like,
I mean,
like,
that is one of the weird things about that, though, is that progression of history. Like, that is definitely gross by 2020 standards, but by 1780 standards, that was kind of par for the course.
Well, you could say the same thing about brokering slave trade, though. Is at the
Right.
time,
Right.
like
Well, I don't have
he
that
could be
issue
doing
with
it
it.
with
I'm
quote
just
unquote the best interest at heart for those people, you know. And listen to how gross that sounds. Like when I say that, right? Like that is clearly like you could be. The
yeah.
term is catachrestic. Like you can apply like modern feelings to this old stuff and still call that shit out because like there's a reason we don't do it anymore, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's not these people who are historians who are saying, well, the show's not historically accurate and that's why we should like shut it down or like stress to people that you should go maybe read a book after you see the show and like Alexander Hamilton. It is these people. They're just saying, well, he had slaves, so like Alexander Hamilton is bad, and
well, and
that's something that we're dealing
larger,
with in the country right now.
Exactly, that's a larger conversation that I'm not saying needs to end in any way, but we need to recognize that's a conversation that is still evolving.
Oh yeah, that's I 110% agree with that. It's just it's strange to see that. It's strange to see that out there. I don't know.
To put a pin in this, like to seriously to just put a pin in this, the thing that I really enjoyed about Hamilton is, and the thing that surprised me is that for all this talk for the last 5 years, people talking about how new and impressive it is, the ways in which it was able to be still new and impressive to me, but also actually tie itself into some old style, actually kind of warmed my cockles a little bit. Like that is the thing that actually made me realize I can get behind this show, because it's not a show that is new just for the sake of being new. It very much embraces that old schoolness. And everything that you've said that you're not comfortable with in it feels like it comes from that exact place.
Yeah, you and I are two sides of the same coin.
Right. I don't think we disagree about what this show is. It's just the ways in which we react to those particular elements are very different.
I guess, I mean, yeah, and just final pin on this side, it's that situation where I have an issue with people celebrating something as new and exciting without giving that proper to the foundation that it is like built upon. I don't know. I guess you should just be happy with anything that brings people to history or theater, like something that captures a group of people's minds and brings them to want to learn more about it. Like you that is something that should be celebrated all the time. Like that's the thing. Anything that can like broaden the audience for things should be given that. But I guess after hearing for 5 years how new and exciting Hamilton was, to sit down and see all of this old stuff that it was also using, it was just kind of surprising to me that it wasn't all new. It was still using the Legos and Duplos that we had been using on Broadway for generations.
I think the show that you really want is In the Heights.
I love In the Heights.
That's what I'm saying.
And I think that's what I was looking. That's what I thought this was. And it's like, but In the Heights doesn't have that general appeal because it's not about history. It doesn't talk about things that, like, yeah, I absolutely love In the Heights. I was so excited to see it go from stage to film, especially being directed by the person who brought Crazy Rich Asians to the screen. And the fact that Johnny Ramos was going to play Ustavi again after playing it on Broadway. Like, 10 years later to play that role on camera, like, it was exciting to me. And I guess, yeah, that's the issue, is that, like, I understand how progressive that show was. And then for everybody to be excited about Hamilton, I thought it would be that same type of progression, just in something that people could more easily root about. And that's why. But to see that it was kind of had all the rough edges sanded off so that it could be easily consumed was a real surprise to me.
Yeah, I can't disagree that it is very good at selling itself to a wide audience, and I think that all evidence shows that. But at the same time, that's not going to be the thing that turns me off.
Yeah, I guess it's that same thing. Just and this is the last thing on it. As of the 40-minute mark, done. It was that, like, I had built up an idea in my mind as to why people had taken the time to celebrate it, and when that stuff just wasn't on display for me, it was surprising. But I will give all the credit in the world to Christopher Jackson as George Washington and Philippa Sue as people I did not know appeared in Hamilton, who I absolutely love where their careers have gone from being a part of this show.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So what else did you do this week, Devon?
Well, I have to, because it's part of the lore of the Say Report, mention that I may have found the first recorded evidence of a Sejohn's Gambit in film.
Oh, yes. All right.
So as I've mentioned a bunch of times, we've been doing the Thursday movies, and I had a friend who, before everything was going to happen, had intended to come up and visit during 4th of July weekend, but unfortunately, plans change. But years ago, and I'm talking like at least a decade, he had recommended that I see Zorba the Greek.
Okay. All right.
So in 2014, when I spent hundreds of dollars to buy a library of films I thought that I should see, whether they have like Oscar nominations, Oscar wins, or just recommendations from people, and I had never seen them, that was one of those films. And, it's now 6 years later from when I purchased all these films, and I figured, well, I should watch it before he comes up to visit, and we can finally have that, long withheld conversation. Have you seen Zorba the Greek, Sejohn?
I have not. No, I have not.
So what I recommend to you and to anybody who has not seen Zorba the Greek is to watch the trailer and then just imagine that movie is what the trailer tells you it is.
And never watch the movie?
And never see the actual movie. Be inspired by the trailer's presentation of Alexander Zorba. It might be Alexei of Zorba, as portrayed by Anthony Quinn. Take that description of him in the trailer and just imagine that the movie is that for 3 hours.
Okay.
And the reason is I told my father that I had chosen Zorba the Greek as the film for this week, and it took a whole lot of dealing to be made. Dale and I switched so that I could make sure we saw it and that I'd be held accountable to make sure I watched it before my friend visited. So that's what I did. And my father, when I told him, he was like, "Oh, Zorba the Greek." And I'm like, "You've never fucking seen it." He's like, "I've seen it like 100 times." And I'm like, "You have?" And he's like, "I like movies, Devon, and growing up on naval bases, that was the only movie we had for 9 months.
Oh,
so
man.
Every time I would go to the movies, it would be Zorba the Greek." And I'm like, "Oh," he's like, "Yeah, no, I mean, you can watch it. You chose it. That's how this works, but I'm not excited to see it again." And that's because Zorba the Greek, as it is sold, is Zorba loves life, and he is this huge, dynamic character. When he eats, you taste it. When he loves, you feel it.
Right.
That's how he's portrayed. But that's about 25% of the film.
No. Okay.
Spoilers for Zorba the Greek. There's a scene where a woman passes away in this poor village, and as soon as she is dead, the villagers descend upon her house and just steal everything. It is.
What is the time period of this movie?
I don't know.
Undefined.
I feel like it's after a war, but it takes place on Crete. It takes place in Greece on the Isle of Crete, and they always talk about it's after the war, and I can't figure out what the war that they're talking about is.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
There's a lot of talks about the Turkish being gone, and the Turks and the Greeks fought for a very long time. But then there is talk about a Russian admiral and a Spanish admiral and a French admiral and a British admiral. They were all the lovers of this French woman who lives in the town. She's the one who passes away. So I'm trying to think of conflicts that would bring them together. So in my head, I'm like, this feels like it's probably post World War I. Based on the fact that they're traveling by ship and just sort of books exist. So it's not in a time before people owned books. The main character, not Zorba, is a writer. Like, that's part of his whole thing. But he wants to be a farmer on this island, and it's strange. But like that ransacking of this woman's home, like that was very different from what I thought this movie was going to be. There's a widow in town that like everybody kind of wants to be with, and when she sleeps with the other dude, they stone her and murder her in the streets because she didn't sleep with the like young guy who was trying to court her. She slept with this foreigner. And I'm like, I didn't expect there to be a full stoning scene. And then like, oh, it's all done, but then someone comes out of the crowd and just slits their neck, and you're like, cool. That's not what I thought. This movie was going to reaffirm that life is worth living, and that seemed like something that might be good for the COVID
now
times.
Again, I've never seen it, but I will tell you that the only thing that I know about it is it's one of those movies that gets talked about as selling the image of the exotic. Like, it's one of those things where in preview and in filming, it's very much like, oh, look at these people, and like look at the life that they lead and how different it is from ours. So the fact that there's extremes on both ends is not surprising, I guess I should say, from right. the little that I do know about it. But fuck me, like not an extreme that I would have expected that movie to go to, even just from the little bit I know about it.
Yeah, my thought process as I was watching it was that I was reminded of like The Gods Must Be Crazy, where they like just shipped out a Hollywood film crew to the wilds of Africa and like shot with this tribe, and they didn't know what they were doing. Right. Because in the beginning, they thank the people of the island of Crete for their participation in this. And then to, like, watch it, I'm like, I wonder if they know what they were participating in when this film was being made.
Right,
like, it felt like that. But
exploitation is what you're saying.
It just felt like an exploitation film. And it won, like, Best Photography, Black and White Picture. It, like, the ones that it won Oscars for, like, it won Oscars. Completely agree. The photography and the cinematography in this picture is gorgeous. Like, I'm not upset that I watched it. I'm upset that it was not the film that The Jacket describes at all. It certainly didn't make sense that, like, my friend would recommend it to me in terms of, like, why he recommended it to me, to, like, you know, to be thankful for the life that you live and what you have and to enjoy every day. Like, those moments happen, but then there are other moments where it's like, this just feels exploitive, and that's strange. But to bring it all together, right, the film ends, and it is Zorba, and it is the other guy, I can't remember the other guy's name, I feel bad about that, and they are just dancing on the beach. Because, like, Zorba, the whole time he dances, and then the other guy's like, hey, can you teach me how to dance? So then they dance. And as we're sitting there watching them dance, my father goes, that's how they marketed the film, is them dancing right there. And I'm like, bullshit, that's how they marketed the film. Like, that's what you remember, or that's what people talked about. I find it hard to believe that a Sejohn's Gambit was being pulled in 1963. So then, the DVD I own, let's talk about, remember how weird DVDs were. The movie is on one side, and then on the flip side is all the supplemental stuff. So
nice,
I go
saving that space,
saving
that packaging space. Yeah.
So I go to this thing, I flip it over, I put on the trailer, and honest to fucking God, they pulled the Sejohn's Gambit in 1963 with Zorba the Greek. And I was, like, blown away. Like, it's not that I didn't want to believe my father. It's just, like, that doesn't seem like the kind of, like, you want to believe that marketing got more nefarious and more diabolical, that at some point it wasn't, like, part of the devil's departments in Hollywood.
Yeah.
No. It was always kind of bad. I mean, I have to go further back, but, like, as of right now, 1962-63 has to be the earliest recorded instance of a Sejohn's Gambit.
And the only reason I think you might run into a wall is because at some point you get to a point in which previews were non-existent, or at least like nothing, right?
Right, yeah.
Like you start getting a little bit earlier than the 60s, and suddenly previews aren't the thing that they're selling people on. Like, yeah.
Yeah, there were
Oh,
TV
man.
spots like before the
Although
50s.
I
Like,
wonder if you could argue. I would be very interested in if anybody out there can think of any off the top of their hat. Like, definitely tweet me about this later. Are there posters like with pictures on them, like, like stills from the movie or paints from the movie of like the final scene? Like Gone with the Wind kind of does that.
yeah,
Gone with
that's
the
a
Wind
very
kind
good
of
point.
does
That's
that.
1939 right there. Like,
Like they kind of show you the end of that movie right there on the poster.
right. I mean, Casablanca, I'm fairly certain, is Rick and the plane flying away.
Yeah, yeah. So it's man, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
I'm sad that you did not get to enjoy a piece of cinema history, I guess, but also
well. I
like
mean, it's not that I did. I'm glad I saw it. It just wasn't as the enjoyable romp that I thought would lift us out of the doldrums of the COVID times.
yeah,
It
it's
was
like when a
kinda,
teacher. It's like when a teacher showed us Life is Beautiful once in a history class in high school, with no explanation of what we were about to get into.
that happened to you too.
Yeah,
Like they
yeah.
just like we're watching this movie, and I'm like, oh okay.
And it's like funny and slapsticky for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden Nazis.
Yeah. And then, like, I loved it. It was one of those moments where I'm like, this is really, really good. I really enjoy this. But, like, the people around me, like, ugh. Or,
Yeah.
like, when they show you Schindler's List, they showed a Schindler's List in 8th grade, and, like, that's the 3-hour movie. That's the for real 3-hour movie. And we, like, didn't watch all 3 hours of it, which completely changes that film.
Like, did you just stop at some point, or did they fast forward through bits? Like,
So,
which way
like,
did
we
they go?
definitely
Either way
watched-
is not great.
Yeah, we watched to a point, and then we watched the next day, but like not from that same point. They're like, we can skip this boring stuff.
AKA the entire like climax of the movie.
Like
but
the whole the girl in the red jacket. Like I'm like that feels like more what you were teaching us about was the symbolism of that girl in the red jacket, not about the atrocity that was a concentration camp in World War II. Like, I don't know. And we had read Night by Elie Wiesel. That was the strangest thing. If we're going to talk about, like, middle school projects, we read Night by Elie Wiesel, which is a heartbreaking account of being interred in a concentration camp. Especially, it's Auschwitz, too. It's like the big daddy of all the concentration camps from Nazi Germany.
Mhm.
And then we wrote letters to him. Like,
Oh.
that was the thing.
What?
And you
Ooh.
just...
Hey
and then-
kids, pen pals. We all know what pen pals are, right?
And it's like some of the people, the
He's
things
not
that they
writing back to
wrote.
me.
No, he wrote back. He wrote back to the class. I don't know if he wrote back to the class, but we had a letter that was from Elie Wiesel, big air quotes in the room, and maybe it was from him. That would be awesome. That like addressed things that we did, and he spoke to me specifically. Like, Devon, your question about this. And I'm like, that's kind of cool as the 8th grader to have this author of a real life horrifying account answer your question. But
Yeah.
now that I look at it as a 35-year-old, I got questions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like, it's the same kind of thing that makes you kind of. We're dealing with this as a country right now. Like
Yeah,
how do we talk about history? How do we approach history? At what point is it appropriate? All this stuff, and it's actually really weird because I wasn't gonna talk about this, but it's a stupid little thing that happened. But we decided to go to the good Walmart. You know, like everybody has that one, right? Like we don't go to that Walmart, we go to the good Walmart. And we decided to, as one of our first kind of ventures out into the real world with the COVID stuff in Utah, at least, kind of relaxing a little bit and in safe ways. So we go out there, and one of the first things that we come across is they have this entire display of community workbooks. and they're all of this stuff meant for like families with kids that are like this is Mr. Policeman, and like this is historical figures, like this is Thomas Jefferson, and this is clearly all like not exactly pointed at things that are happening immediately. Like there was one about like disease spread and stuff like that. And so it's like we're not talking about COVID, but we are talking about COVID, right? Like that kind of stuff in Walmart in the middle of the aisle in these workbooks meant for family and kids. And it's like this is good. Like it felt like it was good, but like I could definitely see how those books might be somewhat problematic. I cannot believe that Walmart like put this program together using the best minds. Just like, you know, the cynic in me just cannot wrap their head around that part of it, right? But on the other hand, like I applaud the idea that like we need to be talking to our kids about this. This is going to be something that's going to be part of our lives for a long time now. Like the protests, COVID, the presidency that's going on right now, like there are going to be things that are going to happen in the next 5 years that are going to be basically life changing, like world changing. And so if we don't start talking to our kids about it, we're not going to be preparing them for this stuff. But how do you talk about this stuff, right? And it's just interesting that I had this exact thought this week and conversation with my family as we saw them. Like we talked about this, and here we are like talking about it for a completely different reason, but kind of the same problem.
Yeah, it's so I have
Even
my
Hamilton
hand
kind of
raised.
brings up some questions, you know?
Yeah, I have my hand raised to ask a question about these community books that you
Mm-hmm.
bring up at the good Walmart. Are these for purchase or are these free?
They are for purchase, but they're like $1, and like there's and they're like going to Ruby Tuesdays and getting the kids menu. Like you can color in them. There's mazes and puzzles, but then like there's also a paragraph about what a police officer is supposed to do in the community, and it's stuff like, you know, like helping out and like saving a cat from a tree type stuff. So like again, not actively saying things like they shouldn't be busting down doors at 4 a.m., but also not promoting that idea either, you know? So, like, I could definitely see a kid getting this book today, and then, like, 10 years from now, when they're, like, looking at the ways that police act and being like, you know, I was taught that police weren't supposed to act like this, is like, you know, that's how you plant that seed, right? Like, so that's what I'm saying, is like, it's this weird kind of conversation of just like, they're making money off of this too, so like it's weird that they're kind of profiting off the moment, but also like businesses being involved is a good thing, right? It gave me some weird feelings, like as the progressive like liberal in me that I think everybody here is should not be surprised that I am. Like I had some questions about this.
Right, and that's why my first question was, are these for profit? Is someone making money off of this stuff? First of all, though, before we continue talking about that, I have to applaud you for that fresh reference with Ruby Tuesdays. I don't think they exist anymore, Sejohn.
No, they probably don't.
They all closed in Rhode Island.
Yeah. But that I will keep you forever in my heart.
Oh yeah,
no,
thank you,
and the
Rolling
reason
Stones.
that the only other thing I can say about the for-profit question, because it's a fair and totally accurate question, and coloring books are fucking nothing to produce, right? Like it's like getting soda at McDonald's, cost them 10 cents to make, even if they're charging 99 cents for them. That's still
they do so little work, right? Like we do the
exactly.
outlines, you do the work.
Exactly.
It's the make your own yogurt of children's activities.
But I will say, we have been to the bad Walmart every now and then. We didn't venture to the good Walmart because we know that's where a lot of people go. So we've been avoiding big crowds, right? But as somebody that has gone to the bad Walmart at 2 o'clock in the morning in order to avoid crowds, they haven't had anything like that there. So it's not at all Walmarts. That's the other thing, is like this is the first kind of time we encountered it. And that could just be a timing thing. But it was also noticeable that like in the nice, big, clean Walmart that is well stocked, that this happened to be a thing. So it just felt a little bit more like not all of them are doing this.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that my mind jumped to when you were discussing them was Everybody Poops. And, like, I feel like Everybody Poops is not a book that should be sold for money. I feel like everybody should get Everybody Poops to know that, like, everybody does this. It's something that we all do. It's nothing to be ashamed of.
Hey, support local libraries, man. Like I completely agree with that. And there's ways in which we make sure that kind of information does get into everybody's hands, right? Like, God bless the internet. Like, I'm sure that these workbooks that Walmart created, you could easily find just as viable like types of stuff online for your kids, you know. But the other thing about that is the kinds of people that are in a Walmart and buying something to like occupy their kids' time are not necessarily the kind of people that are going to support other means in which this information can get out there, right? So like it is also kind of the placement of it is kind of a key thing as well. Like the idea that this is going to get to some people that otherwise would not be willing to participate in this part of the conversation. It was again, like I'm cautiously optimistic about sightings of things like that. You know, and like the same way that I feel about Hamilton, and the same way that I feel about like showing kids Schindler's List in 8th grade is like, I understand there's problems with it, and we should definitely address the problems and talk about the issues and all that. But I cannot bring myself to be upset that these things are popular and happening right now, because like we needed to move in some direction, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a step, and a step is sometimes the hardest thing to take. And even if it's not the proper step, if it starts conversation and maybe we approach it so that we can have a better discussion with children so that they can better understand the things that are going on. Until someone takes that first step, we don't know how it's going to go. So I do applaud that. And just postscript to the whole Schindler's List thing, the thing that really upsets me about it on like a personal level is we took a break, right? We took a break for lunch during Schindler's List. And then when we came back, someone had switched out the tape of Schindler's List for American Pie. And I got in trouble for that. I didn't put on American Pie. I had never seen American Pie. I didn't own a copy of American Pie to switch out with Schindler's List. But because I'm Devon Decker, I was blamed for that. And that is why the whole event is fresh in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just another side to it.
Kids are the worst.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was an interesting moment in my life to be like, oh, I've become this person that everyone thinks would do this. Maybe I want to make some different choices in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to discuss? Anything that you this has been a weird, fun, kind of awesome episode.
Yeah. No, we needed one of those after last week too. But yeah, I just, you know, there's been all sorts of weird stuff going on out there that we haven't addressed that like we definitely have to, from like the nerdy side of things. Like did we even on I was gonna say on camera like talk about like Bill and Ted dropping, right? Like that, like
no,
like,
we haven't talked about the trailer for Bill and Ted, and that came out almost a month ago. It dropped on June 9th because that's clever.
Oh man, yeah, man, that's why I'm so like excited about that. There's all sorts of weird stuff going on film wise. I don't know about it around you, but all the movie theaters around here have decided to just start showing old movies again. We had a discussion about box office numbers don't matter anymore, because currently Jaws and Jurassic Park are the number one movies in the country. Well, and it's starting to seem like this is going to be the way that we deal with this now going forward. You know, a lot of movie houses are going to close up.
Yeah,
like that's just going to happen. But it seems like the ones that are going to survive are going to really kind of fall back on this idea that like maybe we don't need to base our entire business model around the latest movie release making us $1 million, which is going to completely change the way that people consume media too. I mean, we saw this week that like Hamilton it just showed that like people are willing to sit down and consume something fresh and new. If we didn't have a question about that before with the likes of like Trolls 2 and things like that. New sing-along version of Trolls 2 out this week, by the way.
Yay!
Yay!
I will say this. Hamilton was initially proposed to release October 12th, 2021 as a theatrical product. I certainly would have been more upset had I paid like the $10 to $15 to see this in a theater. Being able to just consume it at home as part of a service I was already subscribed to made it like, even though everything was stacked against me, that was like the one thing that worked in my favor. And I want to give them credit for that.
Yeah, and like I think just announced today, DC Universe is having a big shakeup. They just released the rights to Stargirl to CW, and like that's really interesting because like moving in the other direction, like we're seeing that we're still trying to figure this shit out is what I'm getting at. DC Universe I think is slowly imploding. The other thing that is that was big for them was Doom Patrol, and that found its way to HBO Max this past week. Another thing everybody should be checking out this summer.
So
there's
good.
just yeah, there's so much going on right now that is kind of in flux. So like I'm kind of happy that we haven't like put our foot down one way or the other on some of the stuff that's going on, but we're gonna start getting back to that for sure.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, you say DC Universe is imploding. Hopefully, it's migrating to HBO Max. Hopefully, they understand that these shows that people enjoyed, have the thing where you can access all of the comic books that were there, but take the programming and put it to a platform where more eyes are going to see it. Or do what Disney did with Disney Plus and have a bundle that includes HBO Max and DC Universe together, the way I can get Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus.
Yeah,
right?
and like I am enjoying HBO Max, but if you told me that they were just going to take all their DC stuff and put it on its own app, that I was still paying for, all still part of the package, I'd feel much better about some of it because it is not convenient to get around that app sometimes.
It's HBO Max. I love all of the stuff that is available. It is not. I never am excited to go to it, but I am excited about JJ Quintel's new show, which dropped today. So I have to definitely watch some episodes. I think it's like adulting or it's something like that.
Yeah, it's but it is not for. You're talking about the dude that worked on a regular show, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is an adult show.
It is an adult show, so like people should watch it. Just it's not regular show. It's not Mordecai and Rigby. But yeah, no, I'm excited about it as well. In fact, I think that there's people in my life that don't know it's a thing yet, and I'm like waiting to like spring it on them. Like I'm excited to be able to spring it on them.
I was excited when it was going to be on TBS because I fly that TBS banner like loud and proud. I absolutely love the original programming that TBS has done, and like Search Party is another one.
Yeah, that's up on the HBO. Have they put Wyatt Cenac's show up yet?
No, man, I don't believe so.
I really hope that they put his up because that was one of the best like weird TV shows I'd watched in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't spent the stuff I have watched on HBO Max are as follows: X-Men for our X-Men episode and Doom Patrol. That's it.
I watched Scoob. That was
Scoob came out on that, but I had already bought it when it was new because I wanted to explore it. That was a movie, huh? I can't wait. We should talk about that next time.
Yeah, and I'm gonna and I'm gonna say this now too. Next time we are gonna talk about Love, Simon, because you have done so much work on it, and I feel bad that we've gone 2 episodes now of just like barreling past it. But I think we should definitely dedicate some time next week.
I think that's good. I mean, also next week we're going to talk about Curse of the Moon too, so like that's gonna be a part of it. Like don't like we've had some heavy episodes, and like even though this one was lighter, we talked about some gray areas about
any
life.
Episode where you talk about like American history and Nazis in the same conversation, you could admit was a little bit heavier than you intended it to be.
Yeah, exactly. Sejohn nailed it. So the last thing that I want to add is a reference to our X-Men episode, our very special episode. Go listen to it. I love that episode. I didn't realize how much X-Men meant to me. I will just say that. I didn't have a Wolverine in the studio. I have fixed that. Wolverine is now looking right at me, and being Devon Decker, I went as esoteric for a Wolverine figure as possible, and it is his first appearance when he fought the Hulk in Hulk 183.
Nice.
And he is a goofy-looking motherfucker in his first appearance. He looks more almost like Hellcat.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, he's very much more animalistic, right? Like, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he and he wears a full face mask. It's just his mouth that's not covered by spandex, and it's tiny little ears. And I don't even think the claws are like part of him. I think they're still part of his gloves at this point in the Wolverine storyline. But I fixed that discrepancy.
Nice.
So you don't need to worry about me if you're out there listening.
Well, hi, Logan. Welcome to the team.
Welcome to the team, Logan. You can call me Chuck, because you calling Charles Xavier Chuck in the X2 video game is the reason I have your figure specifically. Because you had to fight the Wendigo in that game, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then you unlock the issue, and it talks about why Wolverine's fighting the Wendigo in a game based on a 2001 movie. 2003, I don't know when X-Men 2 came out. Sometime at that point.
2005, and somewhere in that range.
2006 is The Last Stand. I kept saying 2007 a year ago when I saw Dark Phoenix. It came out in 2006. I apologize. A year back. But anything else from you before we send it over?
No, let's wrap this thing up.
All right, excellent. So if you have anything that you want to say to Sejohn, he is very interested to hear from you. You can find him on Twitter at Siege versus the World.
And if you have any movies that you want to recommend for Devon to add to his 2014 collection, he will get to it by about 2026 at this rate. But you can hit him up at Devon D. Decker.
I appreciate the recommendations, though. I've seen some good stuff. But until next time, William, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report. And you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.